The Game Boy Advance, or GBA, was a truly revolutionary portable, and you guys know how much I love my portables. Though, ironically, not the best way to play its own library. Well, what is then? Let's take a look. Okay, I've been wanting to make this video for a while, and I know there's a lot of GBA fans out there. I have here on my desk a whole bunch of different ways to play the GBA library. Like I said in the beginning, though, the premise of the GBA was amazing. I remember in the early 2000s when I read a magazine, a gaming mag, that talked about the launch of the GBA, they got me hooked with one simple sentence. The Game Boy Advance is a portable Super Nintendo. You had me right there. It's just such a great idea, having a Super Nintendo in your pocket. When I saw that, I was sold. I wanted one. I knew I would have one. But looking back on the hardware of the original GBA, this is definitely not the best way to experience these games. I haven't played on the actual GBA in quite a while, and to shoot this video I had to become reacquainted with the hardware. And I have to say, the GBA was never the one that I used to play most of these GBA games. So it's quite jarring how bad it really was. This thing sorely needed a backlight. It was really hard to make out. Now, you're going to say, well, but Izzy, aren't you a Game Boy fanatic? Those things didn't have a backlight. Hell, it didn't even have color. And that's the funny thing, that worked in its advantage, because the games being black and white, they produced a lot more contrast. So yes, we all had experiences of trying to play a Game Boy game in the back seat and you're waiting for the next light to kind of like see what's going on. We all had that, but by and large, the monochromatic graphics produced by this guy were a lot more sharp. Like, there are a few exceptions, of course. There's that infamous Donkey Kong game that makes it quite difficult to make out the character from the background. But that's the thing you ran into a lot with this thing. The introduction of all of those colors made that contrast was even lower. It was really hard to make out what was going on here. That didn't stop the GBA from being a bestseller, but nowadays, with the benefit of hindsight, there are so many better ways to experience this library. So I'm going to try to go somewhat chronologically through them. So of course you have the GBA itself. I already listed the problems with it. No backlight. It made it very difficult to see what was going on. But this thing right here, this is a great form factor. It fits in the hand nicely. It's not too small, it's not too big, it still kind of fits in a pocket. It's comparable to the size of the Game Boy Pocket, so it's not too bad. Immediately after, we had the GBA SP, the Game Boy SP, which basically fixed a lot of things, a lot of issues I had. I should turn this thing on. Is it even charged? Let's find out. Yes, it is. This one had a front-lit panel, so it's a lot better to see what, I mean, for the first time you had native backlight on a Game Boy that wasn't the Japan exclusive Game Boy Light, which I have on my wall here. So this was a real game changer, and you even had a button that you can turn it on or off if you wanted to save a little bit of power right there. It was way more portable than any Game Boy before it. It had a clamshell design which would protect the screen when not in use. It packed a lot into a device that was, when you think about it, about the same kind of form factor of the original, or in this case the Game Boy Pocket, but you could fold it in half. And it had a chargeable battery. Now, it didn't have a headphone jack. You had to use an adapter, the thing that I guess a lot of people, see, the people that gave Apple trouble over the whole no more headphone jack, you have to use our little proprietary thing with an adapter. I think they forgot about this guy, because that's how it used to be back in the day with at least this thing. So the GBA SP was a step in the right direction, and it took everything that made the GBA great and made it even better. More portable backlight. It's great. Some people don't like this design too much, that your hands are really close together, they're a little cramped. I never had a problem. This form factor was always pretty decent for me. But, you know, the front light panel wasn't the most, it's just not the best way to do an illuminated screen. So Nintendo came out with the AGS 101 model, and I think on the camera here you can tell this is much better. This is a true backlit display. So as you can see, it's just way more visible. It's night and day. Everything about the GBA SP, everything that made it great, it's the same thing, better screen. Unfortunately, the GBA SP is quite hard to come by these days. This model that I managed to score here on, I think, Facebook Marketplace, if I'm not mistaken, it's quite messed up. I have to do I'm not sure if you can see there, but I have to do a reshell of this guy to make it, to bring it back to its pristine condition. Yeah, no, but I love, look at this thing, look at this tiny little thing, man. This is a little Super Nintendo that goes in your pocket. Amazing. Still not the very best way to experience these games. So next up you had the original DS, or the DS Fat as some collectors call it. This is by far, and it's quite dusty, it's by far the worst model of the DS. This model of the DS doesn't get a lot of love in the collectors circle. At least I never seen anybody who's like, oh yeah, no, I definitely prefer the original DS. You could play Game Boy Advance games through the slot down here. So we put it in there and you turn it on. This battery's long dead. And you could play your games either on the bottom screen or the top screen. A lot of people don't realize you could change the screens where you play them. You could do that. This made the DS amazing right out of the gate because that meant that you could upgrade to the new model and still play the games from the previous system, which is kind of a Nintendo staple, or it used to be. Of course, shortly after we had the DS Lite, which is my favorite version of the DS. I love the system. It took everything that was great about the DS and improved it. The form factor, it just looks much nicer. The screens are better, they're brighter. But there was an issue when it comes to playing GBA games. So you see they made it a little bit smaller, but they made the slot here, the slot 2, the one they used to, the DS game slot was slot 1, this one was slot 2. They made it a little shallow. So when you put a GBA game in there, you got this going on. Sticks out at the top like this. I have a serious issue with this. This triggers my OCD like nothing else. And as I'm sure you remember, it was very common back in the day to see kids running around with their new DSs but still playing, you know, Pokemon Fire Red or whatever. So this is a sight that was very common back in the day. Just as common, I'd wager, as seeing people playing, you know, original Pokemon on a GBA SP. I bet you saw a lot of this too. I love the fact that you could play old games on this, but the cart sticking out like this, man, this drove me insane. So, after the DS, we got the Game Boy Micro. I did a whole video on this thing, and it's amazing. I love the Game Boy Micro. It's so small. It's so, look at this thing. You can like palm the thing like a magician. You can just hide it like this. It fits it fits anywhere. Like you can bring this anywhere, forget you have it with you. It's always there with you. It's so convenient. The screen is so sharp, perhaps a little on the small side, especially for games that require a lot of reading, like RPGs and things like that. A lot of people have problems with those. And it's perhaps a bit too small. I can't play on the GB Micro for too long. Now it doesn't feel super comfortable anymore. But I love just how small this guy is. And in the Game Boy collector circle, getting a Game Boy Micro, from what I can tell from being on the forums for so long, it's almost a rite of passage. Usually people start a thread saying like, hey guys, I finally joined the Micro Club. It's a little harder to come by. It's a little on the more expensive side. So collectors, they want to share when they finally join the Micro Club, as it were. So now we're exiting the, let's say, legitimate way to play these games. We're going to be talking about emulation. Now, of course, as I think goes without saying, you should only download the games you own, even though that's not, it's very gray area, so I'm just gonna trust that you guys know right from wrong without me having to lecture you on it. Okay, let's just talk about the games. So first off, we have this guy right here. It's a little dusty. It's the Revo K101, which is a 1-to-1 Game Boy Advance clone. What does that mean? This thing plays right here. It has a card, like a card slot. It plays actual GBA titles right there. So you can run emulators on the little flashcard thing that comes with it. It's not an actual flashcard in that you can't use this on regular Game Boys. It'll only work on this guy. But yeah, you can play actual cartridges, or you can download ROMs. You'd think this would be the best way, right? Like it has the GBA form factor, which many argue it's a lot more comfortable, and it has an amazing, amazing screen. This is better, far better than any of the screens on the Game Boys made by Nintendo themselves. It has great viewing angles, the colors are deep, the contrast is so sharp, it's great. However, and it almost pains me to say this because I really wish this could be the definitive GBA playing experience. The shoulder buttons here, I'm not sure if you hear this? They sit really funky here and they're wobbly as all hell. And that bugs me. Sometimes you're gonna press the button and it kind of catches in a funny way. They don't actuate satisfyingly. And this really, like, look at this. I feel like I can almost flip this thing. Like, it feels like, remember when you're a kid and you're in school and you had a loose tooth and you're kind of messing with it? And that's what this feels like. Like, it's so loose and wobbly. And I feel like it's just gonna like pop out at any moment, and sometimes because it's so wobbly, it doesn't actuate super nicely, super smoothly, which, like, if you can get past that, it's a great little system. A little on the pricey side, but it's not bad. Next, you have my beloved PSP. As I'm sure you guys know, I love the PSP, and I'll defend it to the death. Of course, a hacked PSP means you can run ROMs from all sorts of different systems, including the GBA. Like, I have Pokemon Fire Red here. I was beating it on a PSP for the longest time. I ended up transferring my save file to my PSP Go, which I also love. You can also run ROMs on this thing. And then I ended up transferring this to my white PSP Go, which is my favorite PSP Go. Right now it's charging somewhere in my house. The PSP is a great way to run the games, though as you can see here, the PSP screen is far more rectangular than the original GBA, kind of like closer to a square. It's closer to a 4:3 aspect ratio. This is closer to like 16:9, if not exactly 16:9. So you're gonna introduce a lot of distortion into the games if you play them like I do. But like I said, I've been playing emulators on the PSP for what, some 13 years now. It's a long time. This is what these games look like to me. Like, I'm used to this. I'm used to Mario being like a little shorter and a little fatter because of this. So I don't have a problem with it. The buttons all are really great. I love, like, this format is really comfortable to hold in the hand, and it's really easy to mod these things, though they are going up in price as of late. The PSP is still to this day a great alternative to playing GBA games. Of course, we can't talk about the PSP's homebrew potential without bringing up its younger sibling, the Vita. And as you can see, I have Pokemon Leaf Green running here. Now, the Vita has all of the benefits of the PSP, with the added bonus of this gorgeous OLED screen. Like I mentioned in an earlier video, when I first bought a Vita, which isn't this one I picked up last week, I ran Super Nintendo emulators on this thing, and I couldn't quite figure out why the image looked so gorgeous. And it took me some time to realize that that's because the OLED panel, which produces such sharp, deep blacks, and the contrast is so rich, the colors are so vivid. So for that reason, I would say the Vita is a pretty decent way to emulate GBA games. It's not so easy to hack and to transfer files into it as with some of the other things I have here, like flashcards or the PSP itself, because you can just plug this thing into your computer and it just pops up on Windows. This thing requires a few more hoops. It doesn't work that easily, but if you can get through that, and if you can find one for a decent price, which again, they are a little more expensive than the PSP, this is a great portable to own for GBA games. Still not the absolute best GBA playing experience for my money. Now, the 3DS launched in 2011, and as I'm sure you remember, it cost at the time $250. It didn't sell many units, which caused Nintendo to slash the price of the device from $250 to $170, nearly $100 off some 5 months after launch. So a lot of people who bought the 3DS for its original price felt a little burned. To make matters a little bit better, Nintendo started something they called the Ambassador Program, which meant that people who bought the original 3DS could download a small selection of GBA titles. What I mean by this little history lesson is that the early adopter 3DSs that were enrolled into the Ambassador Program, those are the only 3DSs that officially run GBA games. But if you happen to have a modded 3DS like I have here, you can actually run GBA ROMs the same way. So you can run GBA games on a modded 3DS, and it runs pretty well. It's not the best GBA emulation. There are some stuttering issues, a few frame rate problems here and there. It still runs pretty well, but it's still not my favorite way to run GBA games. So, what's the absolute best way to run GBA games? This shouldn't come as a surprise to you because I've been talking about the system for so long here on my channel, but I gotta go with the GPD-XD. Now, I've talked about the GPD-XD a lot here on my channel, and I have some more videos about it coming up, but I have to say, the ease of loading games on this thing is unparalleled. Absolutely unparalleled. And I'll explain to you what I mean. With most of these systems here, you have to mod them in some way and then plug them onto your computer or go through some weird, like with the Vita, I have to go into this thing and turn on an FTP server inside this thing, then go on my computer and use an FTP client to connect to the FTP server. It's just too much. It's kind of like, I just gotta say, using FTP clients in 2018 it's just weird to me. That takes me back to like the late 90s when I was starting my first web pages, back when they were called web pages. It's just, the whole thing is a little too cumbersome for me, even though a beautiful screen, not worth the hassle when I have something like this. The GPD-XD it runs Android and has a browser, which means you can, on the device itself, search for ROMs, download them, and then run them right then and there. You don't have to go on the computer, plug anything in, start a weird FTP server, nothing like that. Now, of course, as of late, finding ROMs on the internet has become a little bit more complicated. It's still relatively easy to find them if you know where to look. GBA emulation on the GPD-XD is pretty faithful. I don't notice any, at least, I mean, maybe I'm a dirty emulation casual, but I don't notice a lot of issues with this thing. I've actually noticed more emulation issues with the PSP than I notice with this thing when it comes to things like screen tearing and audio distortions, things like that. Never ran into any of those issues with this guy right here. And plus, with that HDMI output, you can plug this to a TV and run these games on the big screen. And if you have the GPD-XD Plus, which is here somewhere in my house, you can actually, and if you have the GPD-XD Plus model with Bluetooth, you can connect a wireless controller and then plug this into your TV and play the games from the couch with a controller, no wires. That's a pretty awesome way to experience GBA games. Like, you haven't been able to easily do that since the long ago days of the Game Boy player on the GameCube. So I gotta say, for my money, a GPD-XD Plus with a Bluetooth controller, you can play your GBA games, download them right from the device, so easy, and connect it to a TV to play them wirelessly. That's pretty awesome. And there's more. If you have a smart TV that you can cast an Android device image onto, and if you're not gonna play something that's super action heavy, like if you're gonna play, I don't know, Advance Wars or Final Fantasy Tactics, you can actually do this wirelessly as well. Just transmit the image from this thing to like a Chromecast or something like that. And then there's no wires involved. You just put this right by your side and bust this thing out and start playing, I don't know, Fire Emblem. I'm not a huge Fire Emblem guy, but you get the idea. So this is it. This is all the many ways I have to play GBA games. I gotta say, my favorite by far, GPD-XD Plus with a wireless controller, play on the TV. It's an awesome way to play it. But what do you think? What's, in your opinion, the best way to play GBA games? Let me know. Maybe you like the same Bluetooth controller in your cell phone. That works too. Let me know in the comments down below. And also, I want to know, what is your favorite GBA game? And I also want to know where you're from, because like I've mentioned here before, I'm from Brazil. Creating content in English is still something new to me, and the idea that I'm talking to people from all over the world, to me, it's mind-blowing. I love to hear where you guys are from. I know there's a lot of Americans that watch my channel, a lot of Canadians, some Australians too, but there's some people from countries I never imagined would find me. Like, there's a guy from Algeria that watches my stuff. For some reason, the PSP videos are really popular in the Philippines, of all places. I find that fascinating. So let me know where you're from in the comments. I'm always very curious to know that. And that's all the time I have for today. I'm Izzy, and I'm done.